The trial was supposed to be a formality. Marcus had expected the same polite curiosity he'd seen in the eyes of students and professors during his return. Some whispered judgments, a few stares, an occasional hand offered in solidarity. He had not expected a hearing room packed to the rafters, professors sitting like a jury on a raised dais, the portraits along the walls leaning forward as if eager for every word. He had not expected the low hum of the gallery conversation to stop the moment he walked through the doors. He kept his hands folded in front of him because he couldn't trust his fingers to stay still. The knot in his stomach had nothing to do with guilt, but everything to do with prediction. Rumors were a living thing at Hogwarts, and they had been fed on fear and imagination until they were larger than the man at the center of them. The phrase had begun as a joke. Irreverent students always liked a shocking turn of phrase. But then someone with a scrap of evidence sold it to a reporter, and every whisper hardened into a verdict. Marcus had been called more names than he cared to hear. Unforgivable had stuck. Headmistress Selwyn presided over the panel. She had the weary steadiness of someone who'd watched her school bend and break beneath political tides. Beside her sat Professor Hawthorne, master of the marshal's office, the man who had overseen the inquiry. Marcus met their eyes and measured each flicker of expression. Hawthorne's jaw was tight, Selwyn's thin lips pressed in a line. Not good, not completely bad, not anything decisive. "We will begin," Selwyn said. Her voice had the clarity that cut through the rest of the room. "Marcus Blackwood, you stand accused of using an unforgivable curse on a fellow student, reckless endangerment, and significant disrespect for the statutes of magical conduct. How do you plead?" Old instinct told Marcus to be theatrical, to rake the room with a gaze that would silence the naysayers. Instead, he answered simply, "Not guilty." There, the shortest way to open a case. He knew the articles by heart, who wrote them, who'd quoted them, where the evidence supposedly came from. A surveillance charm on a corridor, a witness with a hazy memory, a voice recorder that had picked up only a fragment. The thing about magic was that it was spectacular enough to conceal sloppiness. An accusatory charm could be miscast, a memory could be incomplete. He had no illusions about the danger of an accusation like this, but he did have allies, people who had seen him at his worst and at his best. That would have to be enough. The first testimony was from the witness. She was small and pale, and so nervous that her fingers shook as she spoke. She began, then stopped and blinked at the panel. Hawthorne's eyes softened for a fraction of a second. Dangerous when you were the accused, because softening was code for a question you hadn't expected. "You're sure about the time?" Selwyn asked. "As sure as I could be," the girl said. "It was during the 7th week of term, after dinner. I came into the corridor and I saw—" Her voice dropped. "I thought I saw Marcus casting a curse." Marcus listened. He listened to the careful way she framed her memory, to the gaps. He also listened to what she didn't say. There were no details about the incantation, no color of the light, no description of the victim's response. It was thin, not because the girl was lying, but because memory was thin when given a single strange anchor, a phrase, a gesture, a rumor. When it was Marcus's turn, he walked to the center of the room. He didn't look like the man they expected. He wasn't defiant. He was measured, a quiet presence that forced the room to wait for his words. "I was in my common room that night," he said, "with witnesses. I have friends who will attest I was there. I've spoken with them. The surveillance charm that recorded the corridor is flawed. Hatewick's charm lattice has known interference from the old conduits in East Tower. If the panel wishes, my friends can be called." Hawthorne's eyebrow lifted. "Do you have any evidence of the lattice interference?" Marcus nodded. He'd been preparing for this moment in small, practical ways. "Yes, I have a spectral reading from the following morning, cast by Professor Leam. It shows a pulse in the lattice at the same time the alleged incident occurred. It's consistent with a number of benign signatures, household wards, transient signal noise. None of them indicate an unforgivable casting." Selwyn glanced at Professor Leam, who was leaning forward slightly. He looked like a man who had just been asked to validate a rumor he himself despised. He nodded once and passed a folded paper to the headmistress. Selwyn read it. Her expression did not change, but there was enough consideration there to keep Marcus from believing himself doomed. The next hours were a blur of procedural choreography. Witnesses testified for and against him. Friends vouched for his whereabouts. A recorder goblin brought in by the marshal's office played the corridor recording. It was grainy. There was a noise that might have been a word. Listeners disagreed. When it sounded like Marcus's voice to some, others swore it wasn't him. Magic bent to interpretation when humans asked it to. The point of the trial, beyond evidence and testimony, was theater. The question in every mind was less whether he had used an unforgivable curse and more what it meant if he had. Would the school unravel? Would parents demand expulsions, reform commissions? Would contractors from the ministry come with their papers and their wagging fingers? Marcus found himself thinking about the smaller repercussions. A student's life altered by accusation, a reputation lost that might have taken years to rebuild. He felt the weight of those things like a physical force pressing on his ribs. He also felt, beneath the pressure, the dry iron of resolve. When the defense called its final witness, it was not someone Marcus had expected to rely on. Professor Inwood, the charm studies instructor, a woman with a reputation for kindness that bordered on pity. She did not look at Marcus when she spoke. She looked at the panel. "I have reviewed the recording," she said plainly, "and I have repeated the analysis independently. I cannot say who cast a spell in that corridor, but I can say this: a genuine unforgivable curse carries signatures, oral cadences, kinetic feedback, and a specific residue in the caster's wand arm. The residue is detectable. I ask permission to examine Marcus's wand." A murmur washed the room like wind through trees. Marcus felt Hawthorne's eyes on him, and then the panel's assent. The exam was quick, another formality. Inwood's fingers brushed the wood and metal of his weapon with the clinical distance of a surgeon. She closed her eyes, then opened them and looked at the panel. "No residue," she said. "Not in his wand, not in his arm, not in his aura." For a moment, the only sound was the slow shift of 100 bodies processing the news. Some faces brightened, others bent into thought. Selwyn made a note in a small book. Hawthorne nodded once without expression. They would deliberate. They would weigh the gaps and the proofs, the social consequences and the precedent. Marcus returned to his seat, palms damp, wearing the relief of someone who has stepped through danger and found the ground still solid. "You'll be convened tomorrow," Selwyn said finally. "The panel will consider all testimony. Until then, you will remain at school." At his table, his friends crowded around him quietly, an arm here, a whispered joke there, to cut the tension. He let their warmth ground him. He had survived this round because he had truth and because he had prepared. That would not be enough forever. Rumors were relentless, and even acquittal would not put them to rest. As they filed out of the hearing room, Marcus paused beneath a portrait of a grinning witch who had apparently invented an elegant turn of phrase for every mood. The corridor beyond hummed with life, students moving between classes, house elves carrying trays, a gust of air that smelled of rain and dust, and the last of autumn apples. "You okay?" Lyra, one of his friends, asked. "As okay as I'll be," he said. He let out a breath that hardly registered as a laugh. Behind the worry, adrenaline had left him oddly calm. He was not unafraid, only practical. There were things to fix now, evidence to secure, reputations to manage, a lattice to prove defective. There were other players to watch. He told himself he would sleep that night, but when he lay down, the image of the girl's trembling fingers in the witness chair looped through his thoughts. It was not enough to be acquitted. He wanted to find the origin of the rumor, the moment the phrase was planted and then harvested. Accusations grew when people fed them, and if he wanted his future at Hogwarts, if he wanted to protect those who would not survive a scandal like this, he needed to know who had started the fire and why. The house tick of the portrait clock sounded midnight as Marcus stared out the window at the black shapes of towers. Above them, a star moved across the sky and left a faint streak, almost like a signature. He traced its path with his finger, and for the first time in days, let himself imagine the work ahead. Not just to clear his name, but to understand the dark seam of politics and fear that had made the phrase stick like soot. Tomorrow the panel would speak. Tonight he would plan. There were spells to learn and people to find. There were names to ask for and mistakes to correct. The game had changed, but Marcus was still a player. He looked at the wand on his bedside table and felt, beneath the memory of fear, the steady pulse of determination. The word that had been used against him was dangerous, but language could be worn like armor, and if he had to, Marcus would wear that armor until it fit him right. The grassland before them lay only about 100 meters from Durmstrang Castle, but it was still within the school's magical perimeter. Durmstrang didn't have a vast ecological preserve like the Forbidden Forest, but it had cordoned off a sizable campus area of open fields and lakes, and this enchanted patch was one of those protected places. "It doesn't look like any obvious trap," Avada said. Like Baron, he crouched and drew his wand, lightly touching the tip to the ground to feel the magic woven into the soil. He first confirmed the types of enchantments, and, only after ruling out hidden snares, began a more active, detailed probe. The area was roughly circular, about the size of 2 football pitches. The ground had been reinforced magically. The topsoil and grass were unnaturally tough, and the whole patch resisted spells. When Avada tried, discreetly, to transfigure a piece of turf beneath his feet, he met immense resistance. What would normally be a minor exertion felt like several times the usual effort. More basic charms, even simple earth-splitting spells, would encounter the same extreme difficulty. Something like this, locked down overnight, no one could do that with just a few wand movements, he murmured. They must have used a lot of magical resources, materials and potions too. Cedric had taken out his wand as well and spent even longer probing the warding. He looked up after a while and asked, why would they reinforce an empty field like this? Maybe to breed dangerous creatures or to run large-scale experiments, Baron offered. Avada plucked at a slightly yellowed, withered blade of grass and felt the hardness through his fingers. If this is the site of the second Triwizard task, it could be an arena for fighting beasts, dragons, or chimeras, classic Triwizard fare. Or they could be preparing a big, complex environment, Baron said, sweeping his gaze over the open expanse. A maze, perhaps. Cedric nodded. Hardening the ground would stop contestants from tunneling shortcuts and keep the maze intact during whatever fights happen inside. Putting champions in front of a dragon seems a bit extreme. Avada and Baron exchanged a look. Both of them were the sort to prefer burrowing and sneaking. Not necessarily extreme, Avada said. Given that the organizers have no qualms about murder this time, a dragon task wouldn't shock me. He recalled the dragon challenge from the original Triwizard tournament. Contestants didn't have to kill the dragon, just steal the golden egg it guarded. That would be trivial for him now. A disillusionment charm and a stealth setup would let him bypass a dragon and grab the egg without using anything truly dangerous. Then, he remembered, many of his most effective methods were forbidden or clandestine. The disillusionment charm was regulated. He technically shouldn't know to use it, and displaying it openly could bring trouble. He also had Imperious, apparition that ignored the usual restrictions, powerful mental and spatial magics, and the soul magic he had recently been developing. If his unrestricted apparition or soul magic were revealed, he estimated he wouldn't have a moment's peace for years. "We can't be sure yet," he said finally. "Let's keep watching for a few days. There's still a week to go." He felt it prudent not to leave any magical backdoors open on himself. It's close to the Hogwarts Express, too. If anything big happens, we'll be among the first to see. No need to fret over it now. Baron and Cedric agreed, and after chatting for a little longer, they returned to the train. While Avada had been away, a house elf had cleaned his compartment. His luggage was light, and the watch they were under hadn't been a nuisance. Lying in his bunk and watching the rows of embedded lights in Durmstrang's walls wink out one by one in the darkness beyond, Avada's thoughts kept circling back to the second task. Compared to the original story, this tournament's difficulty had shot up. Why the change? He thought back over recent events. Ever since the diary episode that drove Dumbledore away and nearly seized control of Hogwarts, it had been clear the opposition they faced now differed dramatically in cunning, method, and reach from what had been in the original timeline. Perhaps, he wondered half-jokingly, it was because he had confronted Lord Voldemort early on and pushed the pure-blood faction too hard. Could Voldemort have been suppressing the intelligence of the purebloods? Had removing him unsealed something? The thought was absurd enough to make him stop and shake his head. He turned off the light and let sleep gather at the edges of his mind, still mulling over the tournament and the people behind it. This time, Barty Crouch Jr. was not the mastermind, just a powerful thug who had been rescued, not the architect of the whole affair. That, Avada suspected, was one reason the contest's difficulty had diverged so drastically. Ludo Bagman, whom Crouch had replaced, was surely still alive. Otherwise, his ingredients for polyjuice couldn't have come from anywhere. Where had they locked him up? And if the second task had been scripted as a magical murder case, how would Harry Potter have handled it in the original timeline? Time moved faster than expected. Updates resume from today. Thank you all for your concern and support. 323. Just a fire dragon, not a threat. Chapter 317. Mere dragons, no threat. In the days that followed, everyone at Durmstrang, students on the Hogwarts Express included, had noticed the strange construction on the empty plot of land Cedric had pointed out. Workers had erected a massive dome there, covering everything beneath it so that from a distance it looked like one huge, dark hill. The dome rose more than 20 meters high, almost half the height of Durmstrang Castle, and its surface was as black and lightless as pooled ink, resistant to both sight and divination. Only late at night were shadows glimpsed moving in and out, figures bearing sealed crates who entered full and left empty-handed. Such obvious secrecy naturally bred gossip. When Karkaroff publicly announced that the dome housed the venue for the second task and warned unauthorized people to keep away, speculation exploded. Some imagined a monstrous beast would be let loose. Others imagined an elaborate, dangerous artificial environment within. A few posited that, unlike the first task, the champions might have to cooperate rather than compete, facing a challenge so powerful it required all of them together. Those conversations, and the inevitable bets, lasted a week. On a cold Saturday, the bell that meant the task would begin in an hour finally tolled through the castle, and the anticipation that had been building reached a boil, all but the three champions, that is. Perhaps because of Avada Kedavra's last words, "The conspiracy hasn't gone away. Stay alert." Crumb and Delacour had both looked pale and worried all week. Fleur's and Crumb's faces had visibly suffered. Avada felt awkward, regretting that his warning had made them so anxious. Had it not been for Dumbledore's confirmation and the fact that he himself had seen Ludo Bagman swapped under everyone's noses, he might have suspected he'd been stirring fear on purpose. By competition day, however, both Crumb and Fleur looked better. Either they'd finally slept, or they'd had recourse to some legal restorative potion. Avada, for his part, had never been particularly nervous. He'd long since learned to read undercurrents. He'd deal with whatever came. If something truly catastrophic occurred, Dumbledore and Norberich University would handle it. Besides, they had already taken discreet steps, and Dumbledore had seemed untroubled these last 2 days. As for the dome itself, Avada had been keeping an eye on its wards. To guard against any sinister additions tied to the conspiracy he suspected, he'd been quietly monitoring the magic woven into the structure for several days. He hadn't found anything overtly dangerous. Instead, he'd seen the venue's layout in advance, unremarkable. A few stone pillars buried underground that could be raised or lowered, each containing small, messy magical devices of generally low power. How they would be used was unclear. They seemed intended to form obstacles if activated in certain combinations, likely needing to be manipulated according to rules to create a real challenge. "Mr. Ken, Mr. Crumb, Miss Delacour, it's time to gather on the field below. You must be prepared to complete the second task." With less than 20 minutes until the start, the three sat in Durmstrang's great hall, surrounded by classmates and friends, whispers flickering through the long benches. Barty Crouch Sr.'s steady voice cut across them. "All right." Avada rose, pushed his chair back, and turned to Crumb and Fleur. Their movements were slower. They still looked tense. "Good luck," he said. His Hogwarts acquaintances nearby stood as well. "We'll head to the stands," one called. "They say this will be broadcast live back to Hogwarts. Good luck." "I'll try my best," Fleur murmured. Avada smiled and followed Crouch and the others through a side door. The route led past temporary partitions meant to block views of the dome. At the end was a curtained tent one had to force aside to enter. Inside stood Ludo Bagman, or at least someone wearing his face, grinning like a cartoon. He'd gone all out. The man wore Bagman's old Hornets Quidditch uniform and laughed with Bagman's characteristic bluster. Avada's mouth twitched with reluctant admiration. The likeness was uncanny. "All right, everyone's here. Time for the briefing," the imposter crowed. "The rules are a bit complicated. You'll face the challenge one at a time, so for fairness, I can't give you everything at once. But I can tell you your objective: retrieve the golden egg." Avada arched an eyebrow. A dragon task, then, still. This time, there'd been no drawing of dragons, and the venue's strange pillars suggested the details would differ from the usual. It didn't bother him. Back in his second year, his defense against the dark arts professor, one who had left a lasting impression, had taught him that no matter how fearsome a dragon might be, it was, in the end, an animal raised by wizards. To be frightened of one was senseless. "The order will be determined by your scores from the last task," the man, Bagman, or whatever he was, said, looking toward Avada with an overly friendly grin. "Mr. Ken, you'll be the first to enter. Outside, a staff member will give you the tools and explain the specific rules. Good luck." "Thanks," Avada said. He'd seen enough performance to know Barty Crouch Jr. had committed to his role. The impersonation was top tier. He pushed aside the curtain with a relaxed air. After all, he'd traded blows with a combat master like Benjamin Baker. Even if certain controlling spells were forbidden, a normal dragon would be little trouble. That thought held until he stepped fully out of the tent and took in the entire competition venue. 3D24. What kind of sadist designed this level? In front of him was a dragon. To be precise, a gigantic beast sheathed in pale scales, at least 60 feet long. From a distance it looked like a small fortress, and sparks still fountained from its gaping maw. If his memory served, the species was the Ukrainian ironbelly, the largest and most dangerous dragon known, the kind Gringotts used to guard their highest vaults. They were making students fight one of these one-on-one? If it were truly a straight one-on-one with an ironbelly, Avada wouldn't be entirely opposed. The Tri-Wizard tournament had been brutal from the start. What stopped him cold, though, were the enchantments welded over the dragon's eyes, nostrils, joints, tail, and every other place a person could reasonably call a weakness. Were they even letting people play anymore? Not allowing even the most basic exploitation of weak points? If it weren't for the thick iron chains binding the dragon's wings, he'd have seriously considered withdrawing on principle. As the dark dome over the arena rolled back, the full layout came into view. Aside from the audience seats, which were protected by powerful wards, the rest of the field was flat and open, without cover or obstacles. If he had to fight the dragon, he would have to go at it directly, with no room for hit-and-run tactics. And in the center of the arena, hovering about a dozen meters off the ground, a platform floated. Through his magic sense, he could tell it was a complex but non-threatening enchantment. He couldn't see what sat on it yet. Assuming the worst, that platform probably held the objective for this task, the golden egg. That meant not only facing the world's most powerful dragon head-on, but potentially fighting it where it was strongest, the sky. "These are the rules of the competition, and the protective gear you must wear during the task," the Durmstrang professor beside him said, looking as if he had just swallowed a fly. He handed Avada a small booklet and, in his other hand, a folded length of dark red cloth, presumably a cloak. His expression was almost apologetic. "Take it easy. The objective isn't as difficult as it appears on the surface. You'll see once you read the rules. And this cloak." He unfurled the fabric by its hood and let it hang. "This specially made cloak has strong protective enchantments and a built-in port key. If you fail to dodge or block a fatal attack from the dragon, the cloak will keep you alive, but the port key will instantly transport you out of the arena. In other words, it will save your life and register you as having failed the task." Avada took the cloak, inspected it, and slid it on with a relieved breath. The protective magic felt solid. The portkey's destination was indeed near the audience stands. But he noticed a small, unpleasant rune stitched into the hem, an enraged dragon curse. He scowled. What kind of petty designer leaves that on equipment? Deciding not to waste time wondering what grudge had been held against the champions, he opened the booklet and read. This competition is divided into two main stages. Stage 1. The dragon's wings are locked, preventing flight, and the golden egg's integrity is initially 0. Champions must use charged stone pillars that randomly rise from the ground to gradually repair the golden egg while under dragon attack. The golden egg's integrity affects scoring for this task and will also directly impact the champion's progress in the third task. Competitors are urged to restore the egg as completely as possible. 3 types of stone pillars will appear at random during Stage 1. Champions may use their differing properties to complete the task. Fragile stone pillars will emit a green light on the ground 5 seconds before rising. They can be shattered by the dragon's impact or flames, but often conceal useful items. These pillars remain in the arena for 10 seconds. Sturdy stone pillars will emit a blue light on the ground 3 seconds before rising. They can withstand the dragon's charges and flames and may provide temporary shelter or recovery. These pillars remain in the arena for 5 seconds. Charged stone pillars will emit a red light on the ground 5 seconds before rising. These pillars generate magic that repairs the golden egg after it is scorched by the dragon's flames, but they are easily shattered by the dragon's body. Only 3 charged stone pillars will appear during the entire task. The golden egg will be fully restored after receiving 5 repair instances. These pillars remain in the arena for 10 seconds. His fingers trembled on the paper, but he forced himself to continue. When the golden egg is fully repaired, or after all 3 charged stone pillars are destroyed, the competition will enter Stage 2. In Stage 2, all magic and magical items on the dragon will automatically deactivate. It will lose its armor protections, but regain the ability to fly. At the same time, stone pillars will no longer rise in the arena. Completely defeating the dragon or being eliminated from the competition will complete the task and award the golden egg, which will retain any repair progress achieved during Stage 1. Avada drew a long, cold breath and tried to look calm. Which monster designed this task? This wasn't a test of skill so much as organized torture. He'd thought the chains on the dragon's wings would ease the difficulty a touch. Instead, they seemed meant to force the champions to burn through a huge amount of stamina and endurance before the dragon got its full strength back. If the cloak weren't clearly reliable, he'd be convinced the pureblood families were trying to off a competitor right there in the arena. And even if a champion could break through the dragon's shields, what then? The rules forced you to let the dragon scorch the egg and wait for charge stones to repair it. There are only 3 charge pillars in the whole arena. Worse, the pillars rise at random. If you chose to hide behind a sturdy pillar to block a charge pillar might pop up in your blind spot and be smashed before you could use it. Great for ratings, terrible for the person trapped under the dragon's tail. Is this a task a sane human could have devised? Not even Umbridge was this vindictive. The pressure hit Avada all at once. He was separated from the dragon by nothing more than a barrier and a distance the creature could probably cross in a breath, surrounded by a set of absurd rules. Stadium stands ringed the arena. Hundreds of thousands of faces watched from above, their eyes full of every emotion imaginable. At the far end of the arena, the terrifying, castle-sized Ukrainian Ironbelly crouched, chained at the wings and clearly ill-tempered, its fierce, vertical slit eyes fixed on Avada across the field, and its nearly 10-meter tail lashed so hard the gusts flattened the grass behind it. "Ready?" the professor beside him asked. He watched Avada button his cloak 1 button at a time with slightly pale hands, then fling his wand out of his sleeve. "Yes." A chill filled Avada's lungs and crept up into his head, clearing his emotions and sharpening his focus. There were no extra dangers on this stage, he had verified that. So now he had to give everything, strength and cunning at 200% to clear this abnormal task. There was one more worry. The rules said the golden egg would play a crucial role in the third task. The pureblood family's conspiracies were likely to explode fully around that time. The third task itself might well be part of a trap. If they meant to kill Dumbledore, why wouldn't they use ready-made hostages like the champions and weaponize the stages? Even just to unravel their plot, He had to obtain the golden egg intact, probe its secrets, and take the initiative. Then pass through the barrier and enter the arena. Avada nodded. The professor indicated the barrier in front of him, which had become passable. The competition will officially begin the moment you fully enter. He gripped his wand and stepped through without hesitation. The barrier snapped shut and hardened behind him. He was trapped inside with the enormous dragon. A terrifying roar split the air. The enchantment on his cloak that enraged dragons had been suppressed by the barrier before, but the instant he crossed it, the curse took hold. The muscles on the Ukrainian iron belly's 4 legs swelled. The beast, over 20 meters long and probably weighing more than 100 tons, readied itself. Sparks flared from its cavernous maw, and waves of heat shimmered the air. Let's begin. Avada tilted his head, felt his neck crack slightly, and met the dragon's ferocious gaze without flinching. He let a stream of enhancement spells leak from his slightly lowered wand, reinforcing his body and filling him with steady power. The ground beneath him began to tremble as the 100-ton beast lunged. He felt a gust of hot air, and an acrid, metallic stench rushed toward him from dozens of meters away. Impedimenta. He struck with an impediment jinx containing over 90% of his mental strength. It slammed into the dragon's left foreleg as it charged, shattering its awkward balance. The iron belly crashed over with an earth-shattering roar. The stands outside the barrier erupted. Though the barrier muffled the sound, Avada knew the crowd had cheered. He glanced up at the golden egg floating high in the sky. Before the dragon could recover, he flicked his wand again. A bubblehead charm sealed around him, and then he summoned a thick white mist, rank with a choking, irritating smell, to blanket the area around the fallen dragon and hide himself within it. He needed time. The arena had been magically reinforced. His favorite burrowing trick was useless, and the kind of transfiguration McGonagall used against the basilisk wouldn't work here. A disillusionment charm would be impractical in front of hundreds of thousands of spectators. Creating obstacles to delay the enraged dragon was the only option. More importantly, he had to learn everything he could in this first stage. The stone pillars, how tall and wide, whether they differed in appearance, whether his spells could affect them, how many could appear at once, and the dragon's breath, what triggered it, what the warning signals looked like, and how to get the dragon to breathe fire rather than pounce. Answers to those questions were the key to winning the whole match. What he didn't know was how loud it had become outside. What a magnificent first strike. Ludo Bagman's voice boomed into the arena's commentary system, excited and breathless. He waved his arms as if to make himself heard over the roar of the crowd. Did you see that? Mr. Ken knocked down an over 100-ton iron belly with one spell. Even in armor, it seems Mr. Ken's strength is as extraordinary as his wit. What will he do next? He's not pressing his advantage. He summoned a mist to confuse the dragon. Don't worry, everyone. Our barrier filters visuals so you can see inside the fog. Oh, that mist has a smell. Look, the dragon's coughing. No wonder Mr. Ken used a bubblehead charm. The iron belly is breathing fire. Merlin's beard, it truly is massive. How far did those flames go? 80 feet? 100? The dragon's flames reached astonishingly far. The creature itself was some 60 feet long, and the blast swept over Avada's position. His shield charm flared and held, blocking the worst of the heat. Such powerful flames, he thought, frowning against the pressure of the charm. At least I finally forced out its breath. What causes it, this irritating scent? Or does losing sight make the dragon resort to indiscriminate combustion? I need to test that before the stone pillars that trigger charging appear. His magical senses ticked, something moving underground. He shifted his gaze and saw a circular glow, about a meter across, light up beneath the mist, green. Green light, is that the kind of pillar that can be shattered, hiding items inside? The moment he saw the green glow, Avada dispelled the trailing white mist that the dragon's breath had mostly burned away, letting himself reappear in the Ukrainian iron-belly dragon's line of sight. That pillar has high resistance to ordinary magic. I'm afraid only dark arts, like the exploding charm, could destroy it, and that's clearly not allowed in a competition. Or I could transfigure a heavy object to attack it physically, but I don't have suitable materials on hand. I'll just guide the dragon for now. 5, 4, 3. Counting down in his head, Avada suddenly accelerated and crossed the green-lit area. The dragon, which had been choking in the white fog, finally recovered. Its eyes, now a furious crimson, scanned and fixed on him. It roared and lunged, swinging its massive limbs to charge. 2, 1. Boom! From the green glowing patch, a thick gray pillar erupted, like a giant tree blasting up from the earth, shooting over 10 meters high in seconds. The enraged dragon didn't seem to have noticed the green glow. It was only a few meters from the pillar, with no time to stop. Crack! The impact wasn't loud. The spot the dragon struck first emitted a sinister creak and then disintegrated into flying debris. The 10-meter pillar tilted and crashed onto the reinforced arena floor, shattering into countless fragments. The dragon roared, but the collapsing pillar hadn't slowed it much. Startled by the sudden obstacle, the beast halted and looked around. When it realized it was once again enveloped in dense fog, it paused. Next time, maybe I can control the way the pillar falls and try to make it land on the dragon. That should do some damage. A shield charm, cast earlier, spared Avada from the collision aftershocks. He even took the time to raise thick fog again to hide while the dragon investigated the pillar, planning more observation. Then he saw a small ball of light hovering where the pillar had been. Is that the item from inside the pillar? Good thing I provided cover. He dashed forward and snatched the light before the dragon could react. It was a small glass bottle of potion, a clear label on the neck. Skelegro? Avada frowned. Judging by its size, it was only a single gulp. The cap could be pulled off with ease. Probably meant for a warrior who'd been smashed by a dragon's bulk to patch up broken bones and keep fighting. I won't need it for now, probably not for the whole match. He tucked the bottle away and resumed probing the dragon's attack patterns, watching the arena lights. Not long after, 4 or 5 patches of blue light, clustered close together, flared on the ground in another nearby area. Blue? Avada raised an eyebrow. Sturdy pillars, the kind that are hard to destroy. Do these spawn in groups? The dragon smashed a pillar before. It'll probably think pillars are easy to destroy now. Maybe I should let it charge into a sturdy one and teach it a lesson, so when a charged stone pillar appears, it won't recklessly rush into it. 3, 2, 1. He fired off a string of acceleration curses and opened distance from the Ukrainian iron belly almost instantly, arriving amid the blue-lit patches to wait like a hunter beside a stump. What met him was a terrifying, 100-foot-long gout of dragon fire. He reacted quickly, throwing up a shield charm to take the initial blast. Sturdy pillars then shot up from the ground in front of him, absorbing the rest of the breath. At least I've found a way to guide the dragon into breathing fire where I want it. Avada retracted his shield charm and moved a good distance to the side. Those sturdy pillars only lasted 5 seconds. He didn't want to stand still and get caught in the dragon's path once a pillar vanished. But he had worried unnecessarily. The Ukrainian iron belly didn't approach targets while breathing. Even after its long breath waned, the dragon remained coiled like a small mountain. Then, realizing that one breath had achieved nothing, it lunged forward again. While dodging the dragon's attacks and deliberately baiting it into smashing a fragile pillar, netting a disposable dragon hide cloak that could block one dragon breath, Avada thought carefully. Breathing fire must be exhausting. It's already used that attack twice without success, but its close-range pounces have destroyed several pillars. Will this shift its mindset, making it rely less on breath attacks and more on physical charges? That would raise the chance it smashes into a charged stone pillar. Could that be part of the competition? Warriors don't just defend against a dragon's attacks. They have to influence the dragon's mentality, too. But if I truly want it to believe fire is more effective than close combat, what should I let it burn? The pillar types spawn randomly. They're not all fragile. Wait. His peripheral vision landed on 2 brittle pillars already shattered and scattered on the ground. After the dragon smashed them, their protective enchantments had completely failed. They were now just ordinary stones, ordinary rock. Aren't these ready-made transfiguration materials? I thought I was invincible. Under the effect of Avada's transfiguration, scattered rocks rose and turned into birds midair. They twittered and darted around the enraged Ukrainian iron belly, teasing him from just out of reach of his sealed wings. Sometimes they dropped small, unidentified blobs, precisely aimed at the dragon's nostrils by Avada's control. The move was so maddening, it even overrode the curse on Avada's cloak. The dragon let out a low roar. At first, with only a few birds wheeling overhead, the beast ignored them. He kept his sights fixed on the tiny, irritating figure that exuded that impossible aura and seemed impossible to strike. Even after a flock covered his head in sticky, oddly scented white spots splattered on his back armor, he merely shook his bound wings and continued his pursuit of Avada. The curse on that cloak was clearly working. But when one of the white blobs landed right in a nostril, and another splattered as he opened his maw to roar, his patience snapped. With a roar that made the audience's insides tremble even through the barrier, the massive iron-bellied dragon raised his 10-foot neck. A blinding red light flashed between his interlocked teeth, and the air in front of his mouth began to warp. A scorching dragon breath erupted, rolling heat waves ahead of it like a world-splitting blade. It streaked across dozens of meters and slammed into the barrier with a thunderous roar. Most of the birds vanished without a sound. The few survivors flapped in a panic and regrouped, circling now above Avada. Good. That was giving the dragon a taste of his own medicine, Avada thought, though it felt like he'd gone a little overboard on dose. While the dragon glared down at him, lowering his fortress-like bulk like an arrow drawn to the string, Avada felt a flicker of relief. The bird's transfiguration suggested to the dragon that whenever he saw them, he should breathe fire instinctively. If Avada could trigger that reaction a few more times, he could condition the beast. He was already planning. If he could make the dragon develop a reflexive fear of close combat, he could force him into a narrow set of behaviors. Then blue lights bloomed in the open space between them. Stones, the arena's assist, arranging themselves to block the dragon's path. Ha, nice timing, Avada thought, smiling. I was just figuring out how to make him afraid of charging. The stone pillars will rise as he pounces. He'll slam his head into them and knock himself senseless. Add the bird's suggestion and my distance control. After this, the dragon will be a turret that only knows to stand and breathe fire. 3, 2, 1. The dragon pushed off with all 4 limbs, dragging his enormous body and charging with terrifying force. Avada saw it coming and braced. Then, with a burst of blue light, stone pillars shot up from the ground, cutting off the dragon's path. Boom! Bang! Ouch! 3 sounds came from behind the pillars in quick succession. Avada's lips curled. It had worked. The collision would teach the dragon to be wary of sudden stone pillars. Since the charged stone pillars took 5 full seconds from red light to rise, Avada could retreat and control the distance, then use the birds to bait the dragon into breathing fire while immobilized by the obstacle. He'd mastered the rhythm of this stage. He'd already pictured the next moves. As the pillars retracted, Avada stepped back a safe distance and collected stray stones, transfiguring them into more birds to patrol the sky. The pillars only lasted 5 seconds. By the time the iron belly began to recover from being dazed, the barrier had already sunk back beneath the ground. The dragon's gaze snapped to the distant figure who had tormented him. A low, ominous growl built in his throat as his body started to glow red. He's really starting to reflexively use his dragon breath now, Avada murmured, pleased. Controlling his mentality was the right approach. Now it's just a matter of when the charged stone pillar appears. He hesitated. Something was off. At first, Avada assumed the red light meant the dragon was about to breathe. But the glow wasn't just in the mouth this time. His entire body was suffused with red. A cold feeling crept up Avada's spine. Wait. The magic structure under the arena, the light wasn't coming from the dragon at all. It was coming from the ground beneath his feet. Before Avada could finish his thought, the earth exploded open. An enormous orange-red stone pillar surged up directly under the iron belly, hoisting his 100-ton bulk dozens of meters into the air. Roar! Startled, the dragon twisted and slammed his thick tail down, striking the pillar. His forelimbs flailed wildly as he tried to steady himself, claws raking and battering the stone column. Crack! Charged stone pillar damaged. Remaining 2. Warrior, please proceed with caution. Avada's smug smile vanished. 328. Little Barty's abacus. Yes, he had worked it all out and finally found the key to winning the Tri-Wizard tournament. If he kept this pace, he would win for sure. Who would have thought, though, that a pillar would appear directly under the dragon's rear and launch it into the sky? There were only 3 charged stone pillars in an arena the size of a stadium, and they appeared at random. But one of those blasted pillars had popped up right in his blind spot, perfectly hiding the red light that should have been visible from the front. The magic structure at the base of the heavy stone pillar even blocked his magical senses, so he didn't notice it immediately. If that pillar hadn't obscured his view, Avada could have lured the dragon or pulled it away and then guided it to breathe on the new pillar to charge it. What kind of cursed probability was this? For a moment, Barty Crouch Jr. felt like screaming a dark arts spell just to see what would happen. Everyone else fell silent too, the audience, and even Ludo Bagman in the commentary box. Barty rubbed his eyes, half expecting his polyjuice potion to have failed and to be seeing things wrong. Was it really random? Or had Karkaroff deliberately interfered to distract the champions? Weren't they supposed to start interfering only in the 3rd task? Could that traitor be sabotaging things behind his back again? But the other Death Eaters insisted Karkaroff could be trusted. No, those cowards couldn't be trusted completely. How could anyone truly loyal to the Master abandon his cause and hide like this? If Dumbledore hadn't driven them to the brink, they wouldn't even consider bringing the Master back. Especially Karkaroff. Barty knew exactly what he'd been up to. He'd use the man for now. But once the Master was resurrected, who did he think would be dealt with first? The thought of Karkaroff made Barty's fists clench. His nails bit into his palms. The sting brought him back to his role. He was still Ludo Bagman, still in the commentary box, and he had to provide commentary. Merlin on high, who'd have thought Mr. Ken's luck would run out like this? He forced himself back into character. Years of resisting Imperius had honed his self-control. His emotions were easily masked. The fleeting grimace of disgust he'd shown a moment before became a stammering, baffled-on-air bewilderment. A man who wanted to complain, but had no words. The dragon destroyed a stone pillar, but that isn't Mr. Ken's fault, he said, scratching his head as he tried to find the right words. He had just brought the dragon under control when a charged stone pillar suddenly appeared right underneath it. He gestured helplessly at the screen. This will certainly count as a regrettable point deduction, and it makes the task far harder. He only has 2 pillars left to work with now. At Hogwarts Great Hall, the professor's table area had been replaced by a huge white screen showing everything from the Durmstrang arena. The professors had moved their chairs into the open space between the 4 house tables and watched alongside the students. They were all stunned that the organizers had chosen a Ukrainian iron belly for the task, and they cheered Avada's bold handling of the beast until the pillar launched the dragon into the sky, at which point silence fell over the hall. This must be rigged, right? Someone muttered. At the Gryffindor table, Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat together as usual. Sitting in the empty seat beside them was this year's Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, famed Aurore Alastair Moody. Moody had been warmly received by almost every student from the start, Slytherin pupils excepted, and even the most haughty Slytherins kept their distance. After all, many of their parents had ended up in Azkaban, directly or indirectly because of this old Auror. Moody's teaching only reinforced his reputation. Whether demonstrating combat or stealth techniques or illustrating a wide range of spells, he made everything vivid and clear. His lessons on stealth and transfiguration were particularly impressive. He showed astonishing methods and occasionally shared obscure Death Eater secrets in class, broadening the students' horizons. But the rumors about Moody's single flaw were true. He was overly suspicious. Any small disturbance caught his attention, and he would stare with a watchful, wary look. Some Slytherins sniped that he looked like a rat. Harry sometimes thought the same, though he didn't say so. Moody paid him more attention than most. Harry had heard it was because Moody had been close to his parents in the past. Since term began, Moody had given Harry private lessons and taught him many detailed combat techniques, most of which seemed oddly focused on stealth. He'd also pulled Harry aside to tell stories about his parents. All of it left Harry with a strong, positive impression of the professor. "It shouldn't be rigged," Harry said quietly. But if anyone might do something like that, Karkaroff would. Moody snorted and answered gruffly, Karkaroff doesn't get the chance right now. He's sitting right next to Dumbledore. Then Ken's just unlucky. Will he fall behind the others because of this? Harry asked, worried. Definitely, Moody said. At least Karkaroff will use it as an excuse to dock points. As for the other two champions, he gave a crooked, ugly grin. It's debatable whether either of them could last a few moves against a dragon like that. Why is that? Hermione asked, standing close by. Hogwarts students had just watched the replay of the first task. While admiring the champions' careful planning and the organizers' bold attempts, they had also learned something about the other two champions, mainly Fleur, since Victor Krum was already internationally famous as a Quidditch star, a household name after the World Cup. The first task, however, had been a test of wit. They had no access to wands, let alone dueled. So how had Professor Moody decided that the other two champions were not as strong as Ken? Sometimes, small details are enough to give you useful information, Moody said. He turned toward Harry and the others. His magical eye rotated a half circle on its own and fixed on the big screen, following the footage. For example, look at the expressions they betrayed when their wands went missing, or the tiny movements when the truth was revealed and they confronted Karkaroff. He continued, watching. If you looked closely, you could see that without their wands, Krum and Delacour often seemed a little stiff. Their hands would instinctively reach for where their wands had been, and then, realizing they had none, they would fumble, not knowing where to put their hands. Isn't that normal? Harry asked, touching his own wand out of habit. After using a wand for years, most witches and wizards would feel uncomfortable if it suddenly disappeared, right? You're right, but you said most, Moody replied, his voice lowering. And that Ken, after losing his wand, I saw no discomfort in his manner or movements, no drop in confidence when facing opponents with wands. That either means he's used to solving problems wandlessly, like some students from Ouagadougou, or he's confident he can protect himself without a wand, Ron blurted, surprised. Judging by how he acted, that seems likely. Moody nodded toward the big screen, where Avada was deftly dodging the Ukrainian Iron Belly. And another thing, when the three of them faced Karkaroff and explained the truth, watch how the other two reacted, especially when Karkaroff and Crouch suddenly slammed their hands down or shouted. They would flinch, turn slightly, lean back, or spread their feet to lower their center of gravity. Those are clear signs of retreat. But whenever that happened, Ken's posture didn't change at all. If anything, his arm lifted a fraction. Because he intended to use wandless magic to meet whatever came? Harry suggested. Or because he trusted Dumbledore, Moody offered with a shrug. Dumbledore was sitting beside Karkaroff and Crouch and could have subdued them before they did anything serious. Even if one or two blows got through, you can't cast terribly powerful magic that fast. Still, the fact Ken was prepared to use wandless magic in that moment shows real confidence in his own abilities, confidence that comes from knowing what the opponent can and cannot do. He watched the moving figure on the screen for a while, then sighed. This student is not ordinary. You have an incredible eye, Professor, Harry said. You can pick out useful facts from the smallest details. I taught you to do that. It's a required course for infiltration. Moody looked a little pleased. Always control what you know about your surroundings. When you meet strangers, piece together their true nature from the details they let slip and choose how to act. But, Professor? Ron asked, puzzled. My dad always said you were an Auror who specialized in direct combat. Why do your lessons focus so much on infiltration? Moody stiffened for a heartbeat at Ron's question, then answered as if nothing had happened. Arthur only saw me in direct combat. And before the direct combat ever begins, he went on, I've usually been infiltrating for who knows how long, disguising myself, getting into enemy camps, gathering intelligence, disrupting logistics, finding weaknesses. The work of an Auror is far less glamorous than people think. But shouldn't your subordinates do that? Why do you have to do it yourself? Moody rolled his normal eye. Guess why they're subordinates, and I'm the leader. I do those things better than they do. So when a tricky situation arises, I almost always go undercover myself. For most ordinary wizards, infiltration skills are more practical than combat. They're the simplest, most effective way to keep yourself safe. At the arena, on the Durmstrang side, after a charging stone pillar had been crushed by the Ukrainian Ironbelly when it sat on top of it, Avada at last recovered enough composure to start steering the dragon's behavior. He followed the pattern he'd discovered earlier, and to his surprise, the creature's fall from more than 10 meters seemed to have injured its limbs. Its pace dropped noticeably. That made it easier for Avada to create distance and force the dragon to use its breath. He lured it into destroying a few more fragile stone pillars and managed to snag small prizes, an invigoration potion, some devil's snare seeds, and a couple of healing potions. Not much, but better than nothing. Then he saw the crimson light again on the vast field, and this time it was dozens of meters from the dragon. Finally, my luck's changed, he thought, his spirits lifting. He sent his transfiguration birds to peck and distract the dragon from a distance, then darted back toward the new pillar just before it rose. The dragon's jaws curled as it unleashed a wave of heat. 100-foot tongue of flame slammed into the crimson pillar. The column glowed as the dragonfire seemed to be drawn into it, purified inside, and then it surged upward from the top toward the suspended platform. As the purified fire was completely absorbed, a number appeared beneath the floating platform. 1. It finally worked. Avada let out a long breath. If he weren't worried about standing out, something that might alert Barty and other extreme pure-blood faction members lurking in the shadows and push them to even more unscrupulous measures, he would have loved to analyze the magic structure of the dragon's flame and that charged stone pillar on the spot. With that knowledge, he could have conjured the charge for the golden egg by hand and fired 4 shots at once. But that would have been no different from announcing he had magical senses. Better to stay discreet. He waved his wand again, conjuring a thick, foul-smelling fog that rolled across the arena. Then, using his magical sight to read the ground, he triggered a series of controlled explosions to steer the dragon's movements with surgical timing. "Second success!" Ludo Bagman hollered from the stands. "It looks like Mr. Ken has found the rhythm of the dragon's attacks and the key to victory." Bagman crowed. This was even more skilled than the first. He nearly anticipated the dragon's movements and timed the stone pillar's appearance to interfere, forcing the dragon to breathe fire again. In the original pattern, the champion had to face the dragon while coaxing it to exhale and at the same time keep its charges from destroying the stone pillars. Now it seems to have flipped. Aside from the 1 pillar lost earlier, Mr. Ken has been utterly composed. His movement and casting pace haven't dropped, he hasn't used any recovery potions, and he keeps going like a perpetual motion machine. But look, the Ukrainian Ironbelly is showing fatigue. This sort of dragon needs to move its massive body. Even with tremendous stamina, it can't sustain constant interference and near uninterrupted exertion. That should make Mr. Ken's second stage run more smoothly. A charged stone pillar has appeared. Can Mr. Ken do it this time? 5, 4, 3, success. He completed 2 charges in less than a minute. His bad luck seems to be over. Everything's finally going his way. Avada heard Barty outside the arena, trying frantically to debuff him, and couldn't help a brief, annoyed huff. The dragon did look weakened now. Its breath had noticeably less force than at the start. If not for the provoked giant dragon curse still binding him, a curse that kept stimulating the dragon's urge to attack, the beast would likely have stopped and lain down long ago. He forced himself to ignore Barty and focused on the task: keep the dragon moving until the final charge. 4th time, he muttered under his breath. 5th time. When the exhausted Ukrainian Ironbelly, its limbs still magically constrained, finally let loose another furious gout of dragonfire that slammed into the newly risen charged stone pillar, the special magic timed from the pillar shot straight up and hit the floating stand. The base on the stand had been showing a 4. With the hit, it flipped to 5, flickered, and went dark. "Mr. Ken has completed the first stage of the trial," Bagman announced, unable to contain his excitement. Despite the bumps along the way, his fine magical skill and sharp insight finished the golden eggs charging. But next he faces the dragon in its full fury. It regains the sky and holds a deep grudge. Before Bagman could finish, a high metallic screech echoed through the arena, as if a rusty machine had been forced to spring to life. The iron chains binding the dragon's wings snapped one by one. Huge, ancient wings unfolded and blotted out the sun. The Ukrainian iron belly was over 60 feet long, with a wingspan pushing 100 feet. Old magics woven into those wings transformed its mass, making its body lighter and far more agile. The dragon reared, issuing a long, piercing roar, and a shadow the size of a mountain fell over Avada. Two crimson eyes burned at the top of that shadow, the dragon's shields gone, its ferocity fully exposed. A gust of wind, strong enough almost to topple him, skewed his raised wand and sent his eye-blight spell wide. He instinctively closed his eyes, but through his magical senses, he watched a blinding, crimson mass of life surge upward. The overlord of the sky had returned to its element. "Protego!" Avada shouted, forcing out a shield charm strong enough to meet the descending dragon fire. Once airborne, the dragon's breath covered a far wider area. Evading it became much harder. The sturdy stone pillars that had occasionally offered him a reprieve in the first stage sank out of sight in this second stage. Now he had to confront the breath directly and rely on his own magic. A primitive fear, the bone-deep terror of a predator from some long-ago lineage, crawled at the edges of his mind and made his legs tremble. He stamped it down, forcing calm back into his thoughts. The dragon was flying a little too high. Bringing it down without resorting to dark arts would be difficult. He needed another plan and to finish this stage quickly. 331. Give away the head from the front. First, let me check what I've actually got, Avada muttered, rifling through the pockets of his specially made cloak. The pockets had been enchanted with an undetectable extension charm and could hold all manner of trinkets he'd removed from the brittle stone pillars. Potions, potions, more potions. Oh, here's a cloak that can block one dragon's breath. Useful, but why would I need that? I don't need to block things myself. He paused. Isn't there anything here specifically for dealing with a dragon in the air? Do the organizers really expect a student to face an unrestrained Ukrainian iron belly, the largest dragon in the world, on their own? He snorted. Let's not even talk about whether the most professional dragon hunters could solo an iron belly. That'd be an insult to Gringotts. As he held his wand up to maintain a shield charm against the dragon fire raining from above, Avada dug further into his pockets with his free hand, throwing small items, 9/10 of them potions, onto the ground. He stared at them with a growing frown, trying to puzzle out the problem. Fortunately, the dragon seemed to be spouting fire with gusto and had no intention of stopping, which, absurd as it was to call calm under fire, let him inspect his gear without being immediately fried. He thought of Gringotts' underground vaults. They keep Ukrainian iron bellies down there, he said under his breath. I saw one once in the deepest vaults, used for their most secure, most secret stores. Even Dumbledore's vault with the Philosopher's Stone or the Potter's Vault don't get that kind of security. And yet this dragon, entrusted with such a task, was knocked out 3 times in a row by a student who hasn't even graduated? Isn't that just saying Gringotts' defenses can't stop one student? He remembered the stories. Well, Harry and Hermione did break in their 7th year, didn't they? He grumbled inwardly as the pressure in his hands suddenly eased. The dragon up above had finally taken a break from its furious flame. Flapping its massive wings, it began to swoop down, bringing with it a blast of wind full of broken stone, dirt, and tufts of grass. The arena had been magically reinforced, but it could not pretend the ground hadn't already absorbed a dozen dragon breaths and the weight of a several 100-ton beast. Rather than panic, Avada felt a burst of elation. It was coming down on its own. His biggest worry had been a dragon that stayed aloft and kited him, which, while not immediately fatal, would waste precious time and ruin his score. If the dragon was choosing to dive, he could work with that. He decided to take it easier on the beast later. If nothing else, the judges liked to show. The Ukrainian iron belly accelerated, beating its huge wings until it became an arrow from a bow. It dived straight at Avada, front claws extended. A diving dragon like that was practically suicidal. At such a charge, it had almost no maneuverability, left itself exposed, and presented soft targets, eyes, nostrils, neck, mouth, at once. For spellcasters, that was like being handed a head on a platter. Avada's timing was everything. He struck the dragon in the eyes with a blinding spell. The beast let out a piercing cry. He followed with several impediment jinxes that struck one of the dragon's wings. It twisted in midair in a grotesque way and nearly broke. The Ironbelly lost balance, screamed, flew past him, and smashed into the ground with a thunderous impact, at a speed probably no less than a small airplane. Luck had a hand in it. Most dragon hunters would never see a dragon dive so recklessly. They preferred to burn from above. This one's hatred for Avada must have peaked. Burning him wasn't satisfying enough. It wanted to kill him outright. Avada had done the work earlier to stoke that hatred, and now it had created the one-hit opportunity every competitor dreams of. Understanding a dragon's mindset, he thought, was half the battle. He extended his shield charm just in time to block the impact and the choking dust. Through the haze, he watched the dragon's life force flicker. The fiery red aura had shrunk to a weak, wavering spark, like a candle in a gust, wrapped faintly in a dim golden presence. But, mercifully, it hadn't dissipated completely. Dragons were tenacious. When the dust settled and the smoke thinned, Avada and the crowd finally saw the Ironbelly's condition. Its head was bloodied, its eyes shut as if in a coma. Its body lay limp, wings drooping, and one massive front claw had clearly been broken, its talons twitching faintly. Unless it was secretly a phoenix, it wouldn't be getting up to fight. That meant he had finished the second task. "Merlin's beard!" Bagman shouted, his voice shaking with genuine excitement. "Look, everyone, the youngest champion has felled the world's most powerful dragon in record time." He didn't just provoke it to breathe fire, he deliberately deepened its hatred, pushing it to abandon its aerial advantage and create this opening. The arena's barrier opened, and a troop of dragon handlers rushed in, nerves taut as they checked the beast. After confirming it wasn't fatally wounded, they treated it quickly and used magic to hoist its enormous body out of the arena. The roar of the stands washed over Avada. Only then did he realize how loud the crowd had been during his match. Ludo Bagman jogged up to the judges' table, conferred briefly with the other 4 judges, scribbled something in a small notebook, and returned to the platform. He beamed and announced, "Now then, I shall announce Mr. Ken's final score in this task, the combined total from all 5 judges, which is 47 points. 47 points. Tsk, that's acceptable." When Barty announced the score, Avada pursed his lips. There was no denying it. That unlucky pillar had been a serious flaw, and if he were one of the judges, he might not have had the nerve to award himself a perfect mark. Still, 47 meant the judges had been generous. At least 2 of the 5 must have given him a perfect score. He glanced toward the judges' table. The 3 beside Dumbledore stared at him with stunned, admiring expressions, and Dumbledore, catching his eye, chuckled and gave him a thumbs up. The massive dragon finally slunk out of sight, and the staff rolled in an even larger crate and set it to one side of the arena, probably the dragon the next champion would face. At the same time, Ludo Bagman's voice, Barty's performance of Bagman, descended to the arena. He trotted down from the announcer's box, carrying a package in one hand and waving excitedly at Avada with the other. "That was absolutely brilliant, Mr. Ken." Bagman's voice was a little hoarse from enthusiasm. "When we designed this task, we never expected any champion to completely repair the golden egg and still defeat the dragon, manipulating the dragon's thinking, a truly genius move," he went on, pulling the twine off the package to reveal a gleaming golden egg, apparently real gold. "This is your golden egg. You must keep it safe. Remember, the 3rd task isn't until May next year, almost half a year away. You champions have been rushing things." "Thank you, Mr. Bagman." Avada glanced at the egg, and after checking quickly for any obvious curses or traps, tucked it into his hand. He asked where he should go next. "The medical tent over there," Bagman said, pointing outside the arena. "Although the dragon barely touched you, you should get checked. Sometimes injuries show up later. I've got to call the next champion. We'll talk again during the interview?" "With pleasure, Mr. Bagman." Bagman turned away, already moving, and Avada walked toward the tent, holding the egg. If he hadn't seen it himself, he wouldn't have believed an act could be so flawless. Barty's portrayal of the exuberant Bagman had been perfect down to every expression, tone, and gesture. Yet beneath the surface of that acting, Avada's magical senses had detected something else. While the persona was cooperating with the body, deep in the heart of that mind there was a faint, almost imperceptible, but solid killing intent aimed at him. Still, at least it had been worth it. He had the intact golden egg. He toyed with the egg in his hand, but didn't examine it closely. 6 months until the third task. Plenty of time. If he could sort out Harry's problem at Christmas, he could spend the rest of the months uncovering the conspiracies around them. Well done, Ken. Shouts cut into his thoughts as his Hogwarts friends rushed him, though because he was headed toward the medical tent, they didn't hoist him into the air this time. Defeating a Ukrainian ironbelly on your own, they shouted. That means you could break into Gringotts' vaults yourself. That's exaggerating. Gringotts has far more safeguards, Avada protested. You've only lost 4 points across 2 tasks, someone said. Even if Crumb and Delacour score perfectly, you'd still only drop to second. But can they really get perfect scores? Ha! They crowded around him as he entered the emergency tent. A burly Durmstrang healer checked him over and declared him uninjured. Relieved, the group lifted Avada and carried him back to the Hogwarts stands. Next, please welcome our second champion, Miss Fleur Delacour. Bagman's voice boomed again. Like Mr. Ken, she must defeat a brand new Ukrainian ironbelly to win. We also thank our staff. Controlling 3 ironbellies at once is no small feat. From his seat, Avada watched Fleur. She was reading the task booklet. Her expression slid from surprise to distress, then to puzzlement, and finally settled into a look of concentration. No champion the Goblet of Fire chose was simple. She already seemed to be planning her approach. What do you think she'll do? The students murmured. She's part Vila, right? Can she hypnotize the dragon? No, Vila charm isn't that powerful, Avada replied firmly. Besides, the clothes the champions were given have a curse designed to enrage the dragon, essentially a counter to Vila charm. But she looks strong personally, someone added. Baron shook his head. Let's wait and see. She was chosen by the goblet for a reason. She can compete with Ken. The arena fell silent as Fleur drew her wand, squared her shoulders, took a steadying breath, and stepped into the barrier. The ironbelly that had been dozing on the ground opened its fiery red eyes. Why am I never this lucky? Why am I never this lucky? Tch, an insight charm. As a champion with Vila blood and a particular talent for mind-affecting magic, Fleur felt the incitement curse on the cloak the moment she lifted it. Letting an ungraduated student face a Ukrainian ironbelly alone, what on earth were the organizers thinking? She tied her troublesome hair into a quick ponytail, tucked it back under her cloak, and rolled to one side to avoid the dragon's first gout of flame. Her wand shot out, a pale gleam caught in her eyes as she began a low chant. The dragon, which had been preparing to close and slash with those terrible claws after its breath had been dodged, suddenly staggered. Its gaze, a little unfocused, locked onto Fleur's muttering figure. The ferocity drained from its face. Even the vertical pupils softened. For a heartbeat, the beast calmed. Then it shook its head violently, sparks flying from between its teeth. The fierceness returned. Realizing something was trying to play with its mind, it roared, spat another blast of flame at Fleur, and then hurled itself forward on all fours like a charging train. Is it aiming for me? Fleur thought, frowning. Her innate charm had barely affected it. She slapped up a shield charm to take the dragon breath and dodged aside as the dragon's charge missed her. This is awkward. If I can't use my Vila influence in the second stage, the dragon will own the air, wear me down. I can't be sure I can beat it. A green light blinked on the ground nearby. The sign a fragile stone pillar was about to rise, spilling items. Boom! A potion bobbed up. Invigoration potion? Fleur sneered inwardly. Avila's mind is far stronger than any ordinary boost like that. She started to weave between the popping stone pillars and the dragon, picking up whatever came out. If her first stage finished sooner or later anyway, she might as well save potentially useful items for the tug-of-war with the dragon. You never knew what surprises the pillars might hide. Then a red flash. The charged stone pillar, rare and valuable, was appearing. Over here, you stupid dragon. Breathe fire. Good, good. Yes, hey, came the running commentary from the stands. You can miss when you breathe fire? Are you blind? Don't come over. Stop. Damn it. Impedimenta. Bagman's voice chimed in over the broadcast. It seems Miss Delacour tried to steer the dragon so it would blast that charged stone pillar, much like Mr. Ken earlier. But she misjudged something. Dragons can curve their flames by twitching their heads while firing. They can arc around obstacles. That's part of the challenge. That blast nearly grazed the pillar. The dragon charged the pillar instead. Would it smash it? Fleur cast an impediment hex that snagged the beast and bought the pillar time to retract. If she can hold on 2 seconds more, the pillar will pull back, Bagman added. She's in a good position. Oh no. The dragon whipped its tail around and lashed at Fleur. She ducked, but the tail strike hit the retracting pillar and toppled it just as it was pulling away. Fleur ground her teeth at the ominous collapse. She had to back off and keep the dragon occupied. Perhaps a Petrificus totalis would have delayed that tail swipe until after the pillar retracted, Bagman muttered, annoyed. Blue and green lights flickered in turn as fragile and sturdy pillars rose, but the red charge pillar stayed absent far longer than the others. Its appearance was rarer. After another fragile pillar fell to the dragon, Fleur snatched the small glowing orb that floated free. She bristled at the sight of another potion, then froze when she read the label. Dragon Breath Simulation Potion? Pour the entire potion onto a charged stone pillar to mimic a dragon's breath and count it as a complete charge toward the golden egg. Fleur's mouth dropped. A thing like that existed? Outside the arena, Avada, watching the text displayed on the barrier, typed 3 question marks into the commentary feed. Why hadn't he known? He'd opened a dozen pillars earlier without ever getting one. Was he just unlucky in everything? A red light flared at last. Another charged stone pillar was rising, but Fleur guided the dragon in the opposite direction. Barty on the stage frowned. She's not trying to put distance between the dragon and the pillar. She's moving it away from the pillar. But why? She already has a charge potion. Why not use it now? The pillar retracted fully, the chance gone. Fleur seemed to trip, and the dragon didn't charge in at that moment. Then she began to conjure a rolling mist across the arena. She's stalling, someone observed. But what could be more important than completing a charge? She's already lost 1 pillar. The mist thickened and swirled, cloaking the arena for nearly 20 minutes. Fleur used the haze to keep out of the dragon's reach, ducking in and out of cover and paying no mind to the pillars that kept appearing and disappearing. The Crimson Charge pillar had shown itself a few times during that stretch. Each time she steered the dragon away, making sure the beast would not smash it, and then she ignored it. Spectators yawned. Some were baffled. Is she trying to exhaust the dragon? The Baron asked Avada. A human trying to outlast a dragon's stamina? Avada shook his head, puzzled but respectful. Based on what he knew of Fleur, direct, head-on, a little Gryffindor in her approach, he hadn't expected such passivity. Wait and see, he said finally. She has her reasons. 334, another Vila talent. First like this, then like that, and then like this. What Barty and the rest of the spectators outside the arena could not see was that, beneath the thick fog, Fleur was clutching a piece of crimson stone in her left hand, the hand that was not holding a wand. If anyone had observed that fragment closely, they would have recognized the material. It was part of the charged stone pillar that the dragon had smashed earlier. A few drops of a sparkling golden-red liquid still clung to its surface, wobbling in the gusts created by Fleur's movements, as if they might fall off at any moment. Yet, for some reason, they remained stuck there like minute jelly-like beads. Fleur gripped the shard tightly as she darted through the fog, pressing her wand to it. Her eyes were half closed. She frowned now and then, as if concentrating intently under the dragon's oppressive presence. One last check. It's done. A red glow suddenly traced along the wand, pressed to the fragment, and Fleur's face lit with pleasant surprise. I knew it. Heh. How could a mere enraged curse constrain me? You really think Vila blood is only charm and allure? She's dispersed the smoke, Bagman called from the stands. She's been hiding in that fog for nearly 20 minutes, doing almost nothing. I bet she's been setting something up. Avada narrowed his eyes, trying to detect a magical trace. He watched the fragment in her hand through the binoculars the arena provided, and finally caught another detail, the drops on the shard, some sort of potion. He realized with a jolt what Fleur was attempting. The liquid on the fragment, A potion that can mimic dragon breath? A memory surfaced. Aside from their renowned charms, Vila possessed another innate talent. Avada's expression shifted. If he wasn't mistaken, a technique he'd thought only he could pull off, and had abandoned for being too showy, was now being used by Fleur. A familiar red light washed over the field again. "It's coming." Fleur's lips curved. She cast several acceleration charms on herself, then began flinging curses, offensive and disruptive, at the Ukrainian Iron Belly. She baited it to charge in the direction away from the rising red light. "She's leading it away to stop the pillar from being smashed again," Bagman shouted. "But that's too far. The dragon's breath can't reach the pillar from here. What is she trying to do?" "She's left binding curses on the dragon to stall it, enough to let the pillar retract, and then she comes back to the pillar alone. Is she trying to make the dragon breathe on it?" Before anyone could finish the thought, everyone's mouths dropped open. A pair of long, scaled wings seemed to move up through her cloak as if materializing from her back. Her long silver hair rose and floated without a breeze, swirling as though underwater. Her eyes became vertical slits, beautiful and dangerously animal. Flames ignited in her hands, yet did not singe her sleeves or skin. Boom! A fireball burst from the hand that still held the stone shard and struck the newly risen charged stone pillar dead center. The pillar reacted as if truly struck by dragon breath. A pure stream of magic rose from within it, coalesced at its top, and formed a glowing filament that floated up to the platform in the sky. A large one appeared on the platform. Merlin's beard. "What is this?" people shouted. Even Avada, who had suspected part of the plan, was shaken. Around him, others were shouting in disbelief. "These wings and those flames, that's Vila rage form. But she's only half Vila. How can she do this? That's not the point. How can the flames she makes charge the pillar? She's a half Vila, not a half dragon." Fleur showed no attention to the chaos. Seeing that one fireball had worked, she smiled with a flash of joy and drove 4 more fireballs with precision into the pillar. 4 more pure streams shot up and attached to the platform almost at once, and the number flicked from 1 to 5. She had charged the pillar in a way no one had imagined. For a moment, the whole stadium fell into stunned silence, until the sound of snapping chains and the dragon's roar dragged every eye back to the arena. Even Ludo Bagman, usually at his most loquacious, looked dazed, staring at Fleur in the center of the field, silver hair streaming, flames flickering. Sensing those gazes, Fleur casually brushed hair from her face and gave the stunned students in the stands a confident smile. With a powerful beat of the wings that had appeared on her back, she soared into the air and hurled an impediment jinx at the base of the dragon's wings, which had only just spread and not yet caught the wind. Unthinkable, Bagman finally managed. A champion is flying above the dragon, attacking from the sky, while the dragon, normally dominant up there, is pinned down by a flurry of spells and can't even get a proper wing beat in. I'll bet that beast has never faced anything like this. Then, riding her flight, a stupefy carrying a fireball smashed into the thick skin between the dragon's eyes. It uttered a pained, unwilling wail, went limp, and crashed heavily to the ground. Watching Fleur's silver hair settle and the wings on her back fold away as she gently came to ground, Avada couldn't help but sigh. The crowd around him still looked baffled, but he had already worked out what had happened. Fleur had analyzed the shattered charged stone pillars and the dragon breath simulation potion in her hand and figured out how to make the pillars think they had been exposed to actual dragon breath. Being part Vila, she had more than charm. She had the Vila's innate magic, wings in that previous form, the ability to hurl flames. A pure Vila would even grow a hooked beak when shifting into that state, but luckily Fleur hadn't inherited it fully. Vila fire and a dragon's breath share common magical signatures, so once Fleur understood the pillar's magic and adjusted her flames with her wand and that bottle of simulated dragon breath, she could produce fire the pillars would accept as genuine dragon breath. She'd completed the first stage in an astonishing, flamboyant way, the sort of thing that perfectly suited her. And in the second stage, when the dragon's wings were unsealed, her performance surprised Avada even more. He hadn't expected a half Vila to have such raw firepower and flight ability, enough even to pin down one of the world's largest dragons and keep it from flying the entire time. Without forbidden dark arts, he doubted he could have done the same. Look, under Miss Delacour's suppression, this poor dragon never flew up from start to finish. Bagman's excited voice cut through the arena noise as the handlers rushed in for a second time, inspected the Ukrainian iron belly, and let it out in a secured crate. What astonishing strength! I can hardly tell who is the champion and who is the dragon. It might sound inappropriate to compare a lovely lady to a beast, he continued, but that's the only way to describe her earlier performance. Now, the judges are about to begin scoring. Bagman hurried down from the commentary box, chatted with the 4 judges, returned with a small booklet, and announced Fleur's final mark. 46 points. Fleur stood in the center of the arena looking a little pale. Her transformation had clearly taken a toll. When she heard the score, she merely shook her head, long hair swinging, neither elated nor disappointed. There was nothing more to be done. Her use of her Vela nature to charge the golden egg in one go had been remarkable, but she'd taken far longer than Ken, more than 3 times as long, and she'd lost a pillar. Given that, the score was fair in her eyes. And now, please welcome our 3rd champion, Mr. Victor Krum. A fresh Ukrainian iron belly was hauled into the arena as Ludo Bagman led Krum out of the tent, hyping the crowd. Krum froze for a moment at the sight of the mountain-sized dragon, much like the other champions had. When he read the rule booklet, his face tightened. Karkaroff clearly hadn't told him the details of this stage. The organizers had kept this one well hidden. Mr. Krum has entered the arena. Ha! The dragon he's facing looks particularly lively. It immediately spat a mouthful of dragon breath. Bagman narrated with relish. Breathing fire is actually hard work for a dragon, but this might be Krum's luck. His charging will surely be easier if the dragon keeps breathing fire. As expected from a Durmstrang-trained champion, Mr. Krum didn't dodge or throw up a shield charm. He met the dragon's breath head-on. If anyone else tried that, I'd call them insane, but Krum's magic seems to be working. Look, those tongues of fire are frozen in midair. They can't get any closer to him. Haha, he even seemed to think the curse on his cloak wasn't enough, and deliberately provoked the dragon. That big fellow must be furious. If I were the dragon, I'd have only one thought: burn the fool who stopped my breath to cinders. This really guides the dragon's mindset. It's breathing fire again. Krum's approach is correct. Avada felt a sting of annoyance. Why did good fortune keep falling to the others? Fleur had gotten a free charge chance. Krum ran into a dragon that loved to breathe fire, effectively saving him a lot of trouble. Meanwhile, Avada had nothing, no help from the fragile pillar, and his dragon had sat on a charged stone pillar and broken it, costing him 3 points for no reason. If the luck disparity had been any more extreme, he'd have suspected something fishy about the organizer's random setup. The first fragile pillar has risen. Bagman's commentary continued. This could be a problem for Krum. If the dragon keeps breathing so much, it makes shattering fragile pillars and collecting items harder. If it goes on like this, his second stage could be tougher than the other champions, though the others didn't seem to rely on the items from the pillars much either. My goodness, Mr. Krum just shattered a fragile pillar with his own power. That spell looks like a blasting curse, as expected of a Durmstrang champion. Avada, listening, suddenly felt he'd been too cautious. Of the 3 champions, he should have had the most advantages, but his play had been textbook to the point of blandness, effective tactics, and nothing flamboyant. He had thought of analyzing the dragon breath structure and even the use of darker arts first, yet events had unfolded against him anyway. 3-36. Shady. Absolutely shady. Absolutely shady. Forget it. I'm too lazy to bother with this. Avada shook his head, ridding himself of the tangled train of thought. He could have solved the whole thing in seconds, cast Imperio on the dragon, publicly analyzed the arena magic that raised and retracted the charged stone pillars, order the dragon to unleash 5 breaths at a pillar in succession, then finish it with fiend fire. 10 seconds, no penalty points, a perfect operation. But what would that gain him besides 3 extra points and the instant impression among the pure-blood conspirators, Barty and the others hiding in the shadows, that his threat level equaled Dumbledore's? That would only make them concentrate obscene amounts of firepower on him. The real opponents in this tournament were the pureblood families, not the other two champions. If anything, the other champions were at times allies. And he still had to win. The title mattered for both Hogwarts and Norberich University. If he had understood Grindelwald correctly, Grindelwald planned to use the tournament's publicity, move his true body into the school ahead of time, and after a high-profile victory, appear immediately to maximize the effect. Refusing to try to win would invite that former Dark Lord's special attention. So Avada let go of the temptation to cheat and concentrated on watching Krum. And look at that, Mr. Krum, Ludo Bagman, really Barty in the commentator's seat, was waxing enthusiastic from the stands. A professional Quidditch player, if ever there was one, he dodges the dragon's fire like a bludger on the pitch. Every movement has a purpose. He's clearly trying to sap the dragon's stamina to give himself an edge for the second task. His methods are far less restrained than the previous two champions, Bagman went on. I've seen no fewer than 5 spells here that skirt, or even cross, the boundary into dark arts territory. Now, I must stress that Durmstrang does not encourage students to use the dark arts casually, but Mr. Krum is facing the largest dragon in the world. He's using every tool he has. There's another fragile stone pillar, but Mr. Krum didn't shatter it directly. He's trying to bait the dragon. Did that last blasting curse take too much out of him, and now he's conserving energy? With a series of provocation spells, Krum finally drew the dragon's ire. It reared, charged toward Krum's position, limbs thrashing. Krum, however, only smiled. As the distance closed, he flicked his wand and a blasting curse struck the fragile stone pillar beside him. Boom! The pillar fractured, the upper half toppling, and under Krum's careful timing, it crashed exactly where the dragon was about to run. The dull thud of stone against scaled hide and the dragon's furious roar rang out together. Krum, safely behind a shield charm, exhaled inwardly. He'd hoped the falling pillar would strike the dragon's head or neck. On a thick-skinned Ukrainian ironbelly, a hit to the back from a massive stone wasn't catastrophic, but a blow to the head or neck could be devastating. If he could have achieved that, the dragon would be compromised for the second task and would avoid any stone pillar for the remainder of the contest. No more charged stone pillars destroyed. Krum hadn't known, though, that pillars could sometimes pop out from directly beneath a dragon's rear. Avada watched and nodded to himself. Watching the earlier 2 battles had given him a clear sense of Fleur's and Krum's styles. Fleur relied on overwhelming power and a comprehensive hereditary talent, head-on dominance. Krum, by contrast, was insidious. His burly appearance hid a trap-laying mind. Every maneuver baited the dragon, every action set up the next. He reacted instantly on the spot and planned for the long game, wearing the dragon down, stockpiling useful items, conserving his stamina, shaping the dragon's responses. Almost everything Krum did now was preparation for the second task. I'll try again later to see if I can hit the dragon's head directly, Krum muttered to himself, mapping out timings. He took in the dragon's charge speed, the moment of the pillar's collapse, and found an adjustment. Then, as he moved away, he glanced at the shattered pillar to retrieve an item hidden inside. For a heartbeat, everyone in the stadium froze along with him. What did I just see? Bagman's voice cut through. Merlin's beard. Mr. Krum found a broomstick in the stone pillar. There's only one broomstick among the dozens of stone pillars under the arena, and it's the perfect one for Mr. Krum. Unbelievable. He just happened to pull that broomstick out. Avada stayed frozen a little longer than the others. When he finally let out a slow breath, the cold air steadied him. He was certain now the competition was rigged, and the purpose wasn't necessarily to stop him from winning so much as to mess with his head. Barty hadn't just been commentating. Wasn't he trying to get under Avada's skin in advance? 337. The fire dragon will eventually face the broom. Not even Krum could make sense of it at first. Huh? He stood frozen, staring up at the broom hovering in the air, wrapped in a ribbon of light. For a moment he even forgot there was a dragon next to him. Is this the kind of prop you'd expect in a task? Fighting a dragon with a broom and without one are completely different levels of difficulty, he thought, examining the model. That's a Firebolt 2001, good enough for a professional Quidditch pitch. Did the other two champions have one? If so, why had their battles taken so long? He glanced up toward the referee's stand, half expecting to catch his headmaster slipping him a favor. Instead, he found Karkaroff looking just as bewildered, a faint flush of embarrassment on his face. He must have realized how it looked. Crumb shrugged it off internally. Luck is part of strength. He didn't hesitate. Instinct took over. He swung his legs over the broom, kicked off, and shot straight up like an arrow. The arena spread out below him. From the height, his eyes could pick out faces in the stands, the referee's surprise, the crowd's confusion, Fleur's composed expression, and Ken's oddly twisted look. It looked like the others hadn't received brooms either. Sorry, seems I'm the lucky one. From this height, the place felt different. From now on, this is like a Quidditch pitch, my home ground. He adjusted the broom to hover near the top of a charged stone pillar, then freed a hand to pull out his wand. He slung a few taunting spells at the dragon below, meant more to provoke than to harm. The insults worked. The Ukrainian Ironbelly growled angrily, raised its massive head, nostrils flaring, eyes narrowing. A crimson light began to glow in the open space nearby. Good, Crumb thought, just like that. He accelerated and leapt, letting a scorching tongue of dragon fire whiz past the broom's tail, almost grazing him. The breath followed his path. As relentless as a bludger, he dodged 1,000 times on the pitch. The familiarity of it struck him as absurd. Keep going. Don't stop. Just 2 more seconds. Crumb rode the broom with the dragon's breath at his heels. The Ironbelly gaped, aiming its maw at him and unleashing flames, but the fire was always a heartbeat too late. He guided the curling blast toward the red glow. 3, 2, 1. Now. With a mighty tug, he pulled the broom almost straight up in a near 90-degree climb. A charged stone pillar shot up in front of him, as if answering the motion, almost brushing his hair. The dragon breath, guided by the red light, slammed against the surface of the pillar. Crumb watched magic condense at its top and shoot up to the higher floating platform where his golden egg lay. The blast hit the egg squarely and made its surface flash. He hadn't seen below yet, but he guessed a flickering 1 had announced itself on the scoreboard. Excellent. Keep it up. He banked his broom and charged back toward the dragon. Through skilled, technical flying, he lured 4 more blasts of dragon breath steadily onto the charged stone pillar over the next few minutes. From above, he could spot the red light immediately, something he'd missed when on the ground, having to split his attention between the dragon and scanning the field. Those few seconds' delay had cost previous contestants. Avada had been defeated by those delays. Mr. Crumb has become the only champion to complete the charging without damaging any charged stone pillars. Bagman's voice crackled excitedly through the arena. Compared to the previous 2 champions, he's already got a considerable lead. If he continues like this in the battle to come, he could take the top score in this round. Does he even need to say that? Baron muttered, rolling his eyes. He's literally riding a flying broom and comparing himself to the other 2 who don't have brooms. That's bullying. He glanced at Ken. Knowing his old friend, Baron thought Ken had probably held back a lot during the earlier rounds. Forget it, he told himself. Everyone had a few tricks up their sleeves. Baron let his gaze fall away, thinking of the tasks and instructions his father had given him before he left for school, orders that still made his chest tighten when he remembered them. He figured in a few months he'd be able to spring a big surprise on his perpetually secretive friend. Below, the dragon's protest rose to a new level, the sound of tearing metal and a deafening roar. The Ukrainian Ironbelly finally spread its vast wings and pushed itself into the air. Crumb tried tossing a few exploding charms downward, attempting to suppress the dragon in midair the way Fleur had, but those bombs of destructive magic could not match the Vila's relentless bombardment. With a few dust-throwing wing beats, the dragon's massive bulk took to the sky and closed the distance toward him. Crumb's eyes narrowed. After ducking another blast of fire, he clipped a corner from his inner cloak and, with a quick charm, turned it into a small mirror. He stuck it to the front of the broom so he could see the dragon behind him. His movements were far quicker than the dragon's, but aerial combat against a dragon was still beyond a one-man act. He had to control the broom. He couldn't cast overly complex or high-powered magic while keeping a hand on the handle, and any spell needing elaborate gestures was out. Should he try the eye jinx? He thought it over. No, this dragon was too clever. It loved to breathe fire and deliberately kept its distance. It only took to the air to make hitting him easier. The Lonsky feint wouldn't fool it. It had likely fought wizards before. It knew the nature of their spells. It looked like he would have to take risks. Mr. Crumb is slowing down, and the distance between him and the dragon is closing. Bagman's voice rang through the arena. I suppose he's trying to bait the beast into attacking with teeth or claws instead of those 100-foot flames. At this range, most spells lose accuracy on a violently bucking broom. Crumb must know that. But closing in like this is risky, though he seems confident. The dragon's breathing fire again. He's no more than 30 feet away. Merlin, it's as if he can see behind him. The moment that dragon opened its mouth, he slipped beautifully, letting the flame pass beneath him. Truly the skill of a professional Quidditch player. Wait, did he stick a mirror on his broom? Clever. Crumb couldn't hear Bagman's strained commentary. All he felt was the wind in his ears, the low growl of the dragon behind him, and a slight pressure in his head. He watched the mirror constantly, reading every twitch the dragon made, his right thumb tight against his wand, waiting for a single opening. Closer. A little closer. That should do it. Any closer, and I won't be able to dodge the next breath. This is barely enough. 3, 2, 1. Confringo. As the flames behind him began to die down and the dragon's current breath wound up, Crumb spun and thrust his wand into the dragon's open maw, shouting the blasting curse. If he could get the curse into the mouth and blow off the lower jaw, the great beast would fall from the sky. Its mass, the height it was flying, and an explosion inside its throat could end the match in an instant. But the dragon was astonishingly perceptive. The instant it saw Crumb turn, it tilted its head and folded its wings, changing course with a speed that belied its bulk. The blasting curse missed. Looks like the organizers still have some conscience, someone muttered. After that exchange, Avada finally steadied himself. He pointed toward the dragon and, turning to his classmates who were still cheering from the close call, began to explain. This dragon clearly has experience fighting wizards. It recognizes the wand and understands roughly how far typical spells can reach. That's why it breathes fire so often. Crumb's advantage in the first stage has become a problem now. The situation's still fairly balanced. If it were you, a 7th year who'd helped him explore the cave asked, sticking his head out. How would you handle it? Avada almost blurted Imperio, then checked himself. I'd try to chip away at it with subtle curses, then go all out when an opening appears. A full-on assault won't be easy, Cedric interjected, frowning. That dragon deliberately protects its weak spots. When Crumb drew his wand just now, the first thing it did was turn its head away, keeps its eyes and mouth out of line with the wand. It's annoying, but Dragonhide isn't impregnable. Use a few more powerful spells. The contest doesn't ban dark arts. This is a Ukrainian Ironbelly. Its hide and the magic in it are far tougher than a common dragon. Do you think everyone can deliver Delacour-level firepower? Why hasn't anyone used Transfiguration? It seems perfect for dealing with massive magical beasts. The arena must be reinforced, otherwise it would be too easy. Damn it, why is this dragon so slippery? Crumb snapped after several failed attempts to lure it in. Even he, seasoned in combat, felt his composure fraying. The moment I turn and draw my wand, it bolts. When I have to split my attention to control the broom, it attacks on the openings. If I force an attack, I can't hurt it. Even with a broom, aerial combat against a dragon is a massive disadvantage. This is dragging on. I'll have to take more risks. He flattened himself to the broom, lowered his head, took a breath, and checked the dragon in the mirror. Then, with a sudden and perfectly timed halt, he drew his wand and spun around. "Oh my God!" Barty Bagman shouted from the stands. He stopped dead, but the dragon behind him can't stop so quickly. They're going to collide. The great dragon, pursuing Crumb, seemed taken aback by the maneuver and hesitated, and the distance between them shrank with terrifying speed. Dozens of feet apart, the Ukrainian Ironbelly lunged and ignited flames between its teeth. At that distance, Dragon's breath is nearly impossible to dodge. Bagman's voice trembled with excitement. Even a shield charm, his broom will overheat and fail. He'll drop to the ground and be trapped under the dragon in the air. My God! Crumb could only manage a silent shield charm. The thin barrier flickered under the dragon's inferno and shattered within a second, buying him barely a moment to try and react. Heat licked his clothes and the broom. Sparks spluttered. My God, his clothes are on fire. His broom's on fire. Bagman roared, flushed with excitement. He's starting to fall. Though this blast didn't activate the portkey on his cloak, he's in a terrible spot, unless he has some hidden trick. Boom. Bagman's words died in his throat. The stream of flame that was surging toward the falling Crumb choked off as if something had cut it. Light in the dragon's throat brightened and coalesced into a massive fireball. Then, after building to a critical point, she violently expelled it in a single, devastating blast. But that turn had a cost. For an instant, Crumb slipped from the dragon's sight. In that single fraction of a second, he had muttered a subtle curse and fixed it to the dragon's tongue. Many minor spells in wizardry can't be cast from afar. Some produce no glow, no sound. They take effect as soon as the incantation is finished, but have a very short range. The levitation charm he just used was a typical example. No visible light, no fanfare, will have immediate effect, but only at close range. The little curses were the same. In that blink of invisibility, his curse latched on. Its effect: in 3 seconds, the dragon's tongue would stiffen and swell, sealing its throat. And that was exactly what happened. 3 seconds later, the remaining breath the dragon had gathered was trapped by its swollen tongue and detonated inside its own mouth. Crumb smiled through the pain. It had mostly worked. If he'd been faster, he might have slipped out entirely and watched the dragon fall. He fumbled his wand up and scrambled a few crude healing charms over his broken limbs. When the pain eased enough to let him stand, he looked again at the dragon. Its neck's scales were blackened, its wings hung uselessly. The creature lay still. The dome around the arena dissolved, and the roar from the stands and Ludo Bagman's excited shrieks flooded in. "Mr. At least he'd charged the golden egg already. Maybe he could study it. He made a mental note to discuss it with the others later. And now, I will announce Mr. Victor Crumb's score for this competition. Crumb had his injuries patched up in under a minute. Emergency healing spells were quick in a place like this, and Bagman's voice carried through the tent again. Combining the scores given by the 5 judges, Victor Crumb's final score is 46 points. There was no uproar. The audience had seen each champion's performance and expected the judges' marks to be fair. Ken had completed the task fastest and emerged unhurt. His only penalty was for breaking one of the charging stone pillars, a matter of bad luck rather than skill. Fleur had taken the longest time but had surprised everyone by manually recharging a stone pillar and demonstrating overwhelming control in the second phase, earning substantial bonus points. Crumb's round had been streaked with luck and ended with severe injuries, but he was the only champion to keep all 3 stone pillars intact. His completion time beat Fleur's by a little, and his agile aerial combat and the crafty way he handled the dragon were plain to see. All things considered, the score was reasonable. 340. Analyzing the golden egg. The 3 champions performed exceptionally well this time. After announcing Crumb's score, Ludo Bagman, played by Barty, exclaimed cheerfully, "Honestly, when we first planned this project, none of us thought anyone would actually be able to fully repair this golden egg, which is why we set up 3 chargestone pillars. In our minds, it was entirely possible a champion would fail to defeat the dragon and complete the second task. That's an Ukrainian Iron Belly for you." And after comparing champion performances from past Tri-Wizard tournaments, I can proudly say that the champions chosen for this restart of the tournament, after a century and with much tougher challenges, are arguably the strongest group we've seen in the history of the event. Indeed, Avada nodded inwardly. He had researched the tournament's history carefully. Even if he, an overqualified entrant, were excluded, Crumb and Fleur alone would rank among the strongest champions ever. Environmental improvements played a part, but their individual strengths exceeded Avada's expectations. Fleur, of course, had incredible and well-rounded combat power thanks to her Vila bloodline and a wand that suited her perfectly. In most fights, her silent, mental magics could dominate opponents. At full force, her uncanny aerial agility and Vila magic could silence a dragon. She had few weaknesses beyond limited stamina. That same profile brought a clear downside against hostile environments, like in the original Task 2, where the aquatic settings suppressed her flames and waterborne, low-intelligence creatures didn't react to charm magic. The drag of water taxed her greatly and left her vulnerable to a Grindylow, an outcome that contrasted starkly with her performance now. Crumb surprised Avada even more. Coming from Durmstrang and as an athlete, Avada had expected a brash, headstrong type, yet Crumb showed a sharp, subtle mind, quick in strategy and tactical adjustment. In straight duels, he wasn't extraordinary apart from some dark arts knowledge, likely a consequence of his role as a seeker. Still, during the first task, Crumb often read situations faster than Fleur. For pure mental acuity, Avada felt Crumb might be his equal. As expected from the best students of a whole school, that would make things easier for him. If conspiracies swirled, Avada wouldn't need to spend too much energy protecting them. The 2 already had solid self-preservation instincts and situational awareness. They might even be able to help. So, I will announce the current total scores of the 3 champions. Bagman took out his notebook again, flipped a page, and read aloud. Miss Delacour, 91 points. Mr. Crumb, 93 points. And Mr. Ken, 96 points. The differences are very small. Allow me to praise them again. The champions of this Tri-Wizard tournament are truly better than before. They all scored above 90 points. These scores will be linked to the champions' golden eggs in the next task, so champions, please take good care of your eggs. The third and final task will begin on May 24th next year. Champions will be informed of the task's details 1 week in advance. Until then, enjoy a peaceful school life and the upcoming Christmas dinner. The second task of the Tri-Wizard tournament officially concludes here. Thank you all for supporting the champions. You may now leave in an orderly fashion. When those words fell, a bad premonition tightened in Avada's chest, and the next instant he felt his feet lift off the ground. His classmates had hoisted him up again. After a boisterous celebration on the express train that lasted from noon well past dinner, Avada was finally set back in his room. Exhausted and full from the feast, he collapsed onto his bed, calves hanging off the edge. Thankfully, he was underage and didn't drink. Otherwise, he might have been carried back unconscious, like those 7th years. After a short rest, he sat up and pulled the fully charged golden egg from his undetectable extension charm pocket. He finally had time to inspect it properly. Notably, at the banquet, everyone praised him for his performance in the second task, but no one, not even his closest friends, came to look at the golden egg. He had not displayed it either. He hadn't examined it seriously yet. Although the golden egg's manufacture and finishing had likely been supervised, if not directly handled, by Dumbledore and other heads, and it had to stay with the champion for a long time, the risk of dark arts tampering felt low. Still, Avada decided to be cautious. Pureblood families had deceived Dumbledore before. The surface is completely intact. It won't open, totally different from the original version. He'd first tried to pry it open by hand, like in the original story, and found nothing. Then he picked up his wand and probed the enchantments with his magic senses. There's magic inside that can open it, but it only triggers after a certain time and under specific external conditions. It doesn't look hard to decode. Should I try now? He paused. Wait, no. After opening the egg, it seems to transmit surrounding images directly, probably for live broadcasting. Since it's not difficult to decipher, I'll set it aside for the moment and check for other dangers first. And it